It is that time for my February wrap up, and how the heck 2 months already gone by. I say this every year. It flies by so fast. It's flipping crazy. So this month I read 11 books, which I think I read 11 books last month. Doing good, especially because this is a shorter month of the year and we had a nice little ice storm and it's been pretty cold outside. It's good staying in with some nice books. So let's get into it. The first book that I read was Bad CREE by Jessica Johns, and this book has a focus on dreams, and I love books that are about dreams. And the weirder, the better. So this book follows the story of the main character. She starts having these weird dreams involving one of her family members that had passed away. And the dreams start affecting her reality. And she had moved away from her family and kind of, running away from the grief and sadness of loss, and so these dreams start affecting her reality. So it turns out that she starts talking to her family members again and decides she's gonna go back home and see if they can help her. It's such a weird and really good horror book. It wasn't like super scary. It ties in like some of the Native American lore, which is really cool. Overall, great book. Then the next book I read was A Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi. If you haven't read Philip Fracassi yet and you're a horror fan, you need to do it. His writing is fantastic. The stories I've read so far, I've only read 2. Both have been awesome. Gothic, and then this one, A Child Alone with Strangers. And A Child Alone with Strangers focuses on this boy, Henry. Henry has like a special ability, almost like Sixth Sense kind of ability, where he can kind of like get a read on people, like what they're thinking and their thoughts, and kind of see stuff. He unfortunately gets kidnapped by these horrible people and taken to this creepy, fallen down old like farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere in the woods. Little do they know it, out in the woods is an ancient entity that does not want them there. And it's weird and creepy and wondrous, and I absolutely loved it. Philip Fracassi, y'all need to check him out because he's awesome. So the next thing I read was Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Pope. This is a little novella. It is a paranormal, like, detective Sherlock Holmes kind of vibe going on. There's like weird occult stuff in it. There's a sapphic love story, and it was weird and sad and heartfelt and such a beautiful story packed into like this short novella, and it was awesome. The next book I read was called If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga, and this has been categorized as like a dark romance, and I don't know if it's really a romance because like it's kind of abusive and disturbing, but the writing is so lyrical and poetic and just beautiful. It was such a unique reading experience. This relationship that ends up happening, this girl, she's Egyptian, lives in America, but then goes over to Egypt, meets people and becomes friends with some of these people, and then she and this boy who comes from a poor family and doesn't really have any money, and he was a former junkie, they end up in a relationship of sorts. It's dark, just kind of like gut-wrenching and heartfelt, and it's so many things, like a tumultuous relationship. And it's a shorter book. I had seen this on Allison Page's channel, and definitely a really good recommendation. The next book I read was Fieldwork by Ileana Regan, and this is a non-fiction. Regan and wife Anna, they end up buying this cabin up north, and they make it into this inn called the Milkweed Inn. Regan's background is that they're a Michelin-starred chef, and you get into like the background story and growing up, and how when Elena was growing up, they wanted to be a boy, and just like kind of like looking at gender and family and food and foraging, and the storytelling is absolutely fantastic. The way that Regan writes is so visual. It's funny, it's dark, it's sad, it's sweet, and there's so much emotion in it, like all bundled into one. It was such a great read, and like the food descriptions, and it's up north in Michigan, and I've mentioned before that I'm from Michigan. It's a place I would probably like to visit at some point in the future. It was just a really fantastic read, and I highly enjoyed it. A lot of like the nonfiction I read is either paranormal or it has to do with like nature and food and like foraging stuff. It's just subjects I'm interested in. I guess it's all like based on a whim too, you know? Sometimes I'll be interested in, I don't know, a subject will come up and I'll be like, I need to know more about mushrooms or mosses or Bigfoot. I don't know. That's kind of like whatever strikes my fancy, but I always have like a core interest of nonfiction type books. The Then the next thing I read was from an indie publisher. It was a middle grade book called Into the Gray by Kathleen Palm. And the subject matter of the book is that it's okay not to be okay. And in the story, you follow these two young girls. They move with their moms, and they're both adopted, and they move away from where they used to live. And in the move, the younger girl, Ash, loses her pink kitty, which is a gift that her birth mother had given to her. So she's super upset that she's lost this. And her older sister, Ember, swears up and down that she's gonna find Pink Kitty, everything's gonna be okay, their family's gonna be good again and happy. And it tackles grief and depression and love and loss and just the hardships of life and the fact that yes, it's okay not to be okay. Life is tough, and it's such a beautiful story and the message it portrays, and it's got like weird elements. And when they move into the new house, the older daughter, Ember, stumbles into this place nowhere where all the lost things seem to go, and it's there that she's trying to find this pink kitty, and there's some weird entities there, and it's a weird and wondrous story, and it really like has a really great message. And that one is put out by Spooky House Press. Also, I'll have links for all these books down below. Those are affiliate links, which is a great way to support the channel. And then also it goes to help support indie bookstores as well. The next book I read was The Book of Goose by Yi-Yoon Lee. And this is a story. It's about this friendship between these two girls. One of the girls is very like manipulative and bossy and kind of always making her friend do all the stuff that she just kind of goes along with, you know, and it's kind of a toxic relationship and it's really strange, but the way it's written was really fantastic. So the girl, Fabienne, she ends up passing away. Like that's how the book starts. This is all in the cover. You can read it on the cover of the book. It's like Fabienne is dead, and now like the other girl's like, I'm gonna tell the story of my life and what life was like with Fabienne, how like they completed each other in some weird, very disturbing, obsessive kind of ways. And Fabienne ended up like pushing the other girl to become this author, even though Fabienne wrote or narrated the books, and then this girl ended up having this kind of strange life of fame and going to this school for all girls to become, you know, cultured and whatnot, and it was really beautifully written. The next book I read was The House Witch by Delum Hack. This book is a cozy fantasy, and it's funny and it's a little campy, but it's super cozy. There's this witch, and he ends up being this house witch for this in this kingdom at this castle, and he doesn't want anyone to know he's a witch, but circumstances happen, and then people in the castle start finding out that he is, and like a house witch in the eyes of the other witches, or at least some people kind of think of as worthless because this person's power only works like in their home and whatnot. And it's about like believing in yourself and finding hidden strengths and being stronger than you knew you were, and there's some romance in it. It was a fun, witchy, magical read, and I really enjoyed it. This is the first in a trilogy, and I definitely am gonna get the other two books and read those too, because I really enjoyed this one. I don't remember how many pages it was. It might have been close to 400. I got it from the library, so I think I'm gonna just like buy the whole trilogy online. That's what I did with the Mistborn trilogy from Brandon Sanderson. I like got the first one from the library and I really liked it, and then I bought the other two. I still need to buy the first one so I have the complete trilogy. But so the next book I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a book that centers around time travel, but there are many caveats to it. One, you have to be in this cafe to travel back in time. Two, you can only be in that cafe at a prior time that you had been there, and you can only see people who had been in the cafe and had been there before. And then there's some other interesting rules, and you followed the stories of like 4 different people who go back in time. It's a short novella, and I believe there's now 4 books in the series, so I've only read the first one, and I want to definitely read the other ones. It's heartfelt and emotional, and it's sweet and sad, and there's moments of joy and light, and it was really beautiful. I really like a novella that can pack in all these like big moments in such a tiny like package. I think it's pretty cool. The next book I read was another librarian recommended book. I was chatting with my local librarian again, as once in a while I do. She's not always there when I go. There was only one that I really talked to. The other ones, I don't know. But she recommended another author to me, and it was Wendy Webb, and so I read The Stroke of Winter. This is a haunted house story. It was just a nice kind of thriller story. I feel like it could have been a little faster paced, but I enjoyed the story. I liked that it had, you know, we're in winter right now, so I like the winter vibe of it, and then I like the haunted house. And what I thought was cool, and this is the first book I've encountered this in, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. There was actual ghost hunters in it. You know, nowadays with all the paranormal stuff on TV, like I'm surprised I haven't come into contact with that in other books. So in it, you know, when they find out the house is haunted, there's this group of ghost hunters that come in to help the woman who's experiencing the haunting to like figure this out and try to get rid of the ghosts, or, you know, help the ghosts figure out what the messages they're trying to get across to the owner of the house and whatnot. And then the next book I read was another nonfiction book by Chuk Kwan, and it's called Have You Eaten Yet? And it's about Chinese immigrants and Chinese restaurants across the globe, and all these different like countries that there's Chinese restaurants in, and the immigrant stories and their life and their family and just their trials and tribulations. And it's such a beautiful, eye-opening book. And apparently too, there's a whole documentary that this guy that wrote it made. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head. I don't know if it's just like Chinese restaurants. Oh, let me see if I can look it up real quick. It might just be called Chinese Restaurants. The docu-series is called Chinese Restaurants, and I plan on watching that soon. And there's some photos and stuff too in the book, and it would be really cool to, like, after reading all that, to put visually the stories that were in this book and see it on the screen. So I'm gonna see if I can track that down. I don't know if it's on Netflix or one of the streaming services, and watch that very soon. If you guys are a fan of videos where I talk about multiple books that I am reading or have read, the next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out. And if we had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.